So let me welcome our next presenter, Dimitrios Goranitis. He is Deloitte Central Europe Risk Advisory Leader. He will present the topic on shared services and how fintechs can benefit. So we will be back with the presentation in a moment.
Thank you, Mindaugas, for introducing me. Thanks everybody for attending such an interesting event. I've been following all the great speakers today. I'm really impressed with all the activity that we see behind fintech. I think for years we were predicting that this is an area that will really launch and will really develop in this decade. But little we expected that the pandemic that seemed to have a catastrophic impact on our society and economy would be such a catalyst for this business. Yes, so we see a tremendous change. I think across the board in the services industry, in financial services, we see a tremendous change coming pretty much out of necessity. So we can attribute the growth of the entire fintech industry to the betterness of its technology, to the improvement of partnerships and alliances. But I would say that we all realize the use and the benefit of the fintech industry. I think 5 times as much during the pandemic. Yes. And I think that this is not an incidental change. I don't think that going back to normality, whatever that normality is going to drive the focus away of the fintech industry. Yes, so I think it has always been an exciting sector in the services industry, but I think in the last year it was an introduction to the very wide audience. Yeah. One of the things that also really attracted a lot of attention because of the very large growth of the fintech industry in the last 12 to 24 months is also regulatory scrutiny. Yeah, and there are examples like very mature fintech banks that like a Wirecard that have really monopolized the interest of the regulators and the press lately, and it comes to show us how important the scrutiny will become from the regulators in this area as fintech is taking a dominant role in the financial services industry. Yeah, and the thing that really enabled the fintech industry to be potentially much faster moving and more efficient, particularly in the payments arena rather than the banks, was the fact that it is quite agile and it doesn't have that legacy, yeah, coming from the large banks who are often very bureaucratic. The trends that we see in the industry are twofold. Yes, the first one is from the regulator, who has been struggling in the last 2-3 years to find the consensus of how to regulate this sector. Yes, and part of it is the regulatory front. So the EBA is and ESMA are really looking into an efficient way, a uniform way of regulating fintech, and start identifying new types of risk. Yes, and inside this type of risk, what is fundamental, what is not, and how it can be mitigated. Yes, so we have to say that we're still in the beginning of a regulatory framework for the fintech. Yes, and it's something that's going to be developed through trial and error. Yeah, it's going to be developed through the experience of the regulator on the subject. Yes, and The other side is the internal maturity of the fintech industry. Yes, so we have different levels of maturity. We have a lot of startups, and then we have a lot of mature players in the market, and they increasingly understand their obligations. Yes, towards the regulator and the regulatory framework. Yeah, so their their size is not negligible anymore. Their role starts becoming systemic to the economy. So the weight of regulation that they need to carry becomes even more significant. Yes, and the competitive advantage that fintech was bringing on the table, traditionally bringing on the table, sorry, was efficiency and cost. Yes, that was then translating into a better and cheaper experience for the client. So now we have to say that fintech is going through a maturity phase that has to defend its traditional benefits. Yeah, in an environment that pushes for more reporting and more regulatory control. One of the elements that fintech has been very intelligent, yes, and I think that it's one of the areas that where they bring a huge competitive advantage over the traditional model of the bank is its approach to outsourcing. Yes, the fintech the fintech industry very quickly understood that I will need to have a very agile model. Yes. I will need to have a cost-based model or a subscription-based model, yes, rather than committing myself to non-ending investments to develop the infrastructure that I need, yes. What a big part of the fintech industry did, this is an example that we also discuss a lot with the banks, as the banks are trying to get best practices from the fintech industry, is their approach to technology, their approach to professional services, their approach to back office. So most of the fintech industry decided to focus on the core activity. Yes, and this is something that we very often use it as an example for the banks. Yes, sometimes it takes some effort to remind the bank that the core activity is lending. Yes, it's not building infrastructure or developing software or focusing on your back office or your reporting. Yes, your core service is lending. Yes, and this is something that it is very much embedded in the DNA of the fintech. Yeah. So what we have seen is an activity sharing model. Yes. So if you don't have to build or maintain your technology, yes, you're going to use your outsourcing model to do it more efficiently outside. Same goes. And that we've seen variations of using outsourcing depending on the size of the fintech. Yes, it could be the case of a startup that clearly doesn't have the funds to invest. Yes, to develop a hard infrastructure. Yes, and this could be an approach for a new startup. Yes, why suffocate yourself with a big startup investment when you can turn it into a variable cost? Yes, and this we have also seen on more mature fintech, primarily driven not just cost, yes, but also operational efficiency. So why grow an internal team way too much? Why don't I still maintain a very agile, lean team? Yes, and then base the non-core activities of my business into service level agreements with different vendors. Yeah, and that responds a lot to the volatility of the market. Yes, and it's very well received by both investors. Yes, so the fintech is attracting a lot of the investor attention right now, and the investors are very much interested into the fixed cost aspect. Yeah, right now of the fintech platform due to its volatility. And then on the other side, it has been received very well by the regulators and the supervisors. Yes, because of the traditional outlook in the market, they still perceive the fintech industry to be of high risk. Yes. The fact that a big part of the non-core operations, but very much related to finance or compliance or reporting, it's going to be a joint operation with a reputable vendor. Yes, that takes the fintech a long way with its partners, whether the partner is a bank or whether the counterparty is a supervisor or a regulator. Yes, so we see different dynamics. Strengthening the outsourcing model in the fintech industry, yes, but every class of and every size and every different maturity level inside the fintech sector is utilizing the outsourcing model much more efficiently than traditional players like the banks. Yes. I would say that this is a best practice that some of the challenger banks have been adopting. Yes. Because their shareholder or their structural model is very fresh. Yes, but again, it's still not as agile as the fintech sector. Yeah, and this is going to be the key going forward of how to retain the cost management. Yes, that actually brought you to compete with the traditional sector. Yeah. So I would say the challenge that the fintech industry has now is to defend the cost model. Yeah. And by developing the same amount of infrastructure like the banks, by developing the same type of startup investment, the same type of capex and the same type of fixed cost is going to bring the fintech at par with the bank. Yes. So the advantage of the competitive pricing will erode. Yes. So that's why the outsourcing model could be one of the ways, yes, for the fintech industry to defend its cost base, yes, and its pricing. So areas, Deloitte has a center of an outsourcing center for the fintech industry in Central and Eastern Europe. Our center is being utilized right now, not just in Central and Eastern Europe, but in 22 countries in EMEA. And although some of the areas are quite common, agility and flexibility is also a characteristic of our platform. Yes, so we're going to find a lot of requests in terms of finance and reporting, financial risk management, internal audit and compliance, back office operations, maintaining the technology or the software licenses. Every fintech, according to its size or its maturity level or its cost base, comes with different requests. Yes, and some of them could be A to Z. We have cases where we cover the entire non-core activities, yes, of a fintech, and there are areas where we cover specific functions, like when it comes to financial reporting, or when it comes to regulatory reporting, or when it comes to seconding a compliance manager or even a DPO. Yeah. So it varies a lot, but it starts showing the players in the industry of how cheaper and more efficient it is to operate on an SLA level, yes, rather than to operate on an internal infrastructure level. We do expect this trend to continue, yes, as the fintech industry is growing, and we expect in the next 12 to 24 months to grow even faster. Yes, and still for the fintech industry to defend its cost structure, yes, they still want to maintain the lean approach. Yeah. And the focus on variable cost rather than creating a lot of capex or creating a lot of fixed costs. And the other element that's gaining a lot of momentum on how we see fintech clients referring to Deloitte for support is the type of assurance, if you want, that we bring to the market on how regulators or potentially more skeptical traditional banks are looking at the fintech industry. Yes, in many cases they are viewing a partner like Deloitte as a very credible party, especially when it comes to regulatory support, especially when it comes to outsourced reporting functions. So they show de facto like a level of comfort, I would say, in outsourcing significant functions to a platform of like an independent Big Four company. And this is, I think this is the dynamic trend that we see in the market. And I wouldn't like to steal more time from my co-presenters. Feel free to ask me questions, Mindaugas.
Thanks, Dimitrios. Yeah, I see on chat there are currently no questions to you. Maybe then you could tell us more what is the usual service that is most wanted by fintech, or is it kind of a bundle of services that they are willing to outsource, or is it like more related, for example, one area like reporting or internal audit or some other?
One area that gains a lot of momentum, not just in the fintech industry, but also in the banking industry, is reporting. Yes. So there has been so much regulation that raises the complexity of reporting, that requires a lot of technology and a lot of know-how to keep it up to date, that I would say this is the most mature service that we offer to the fintech industry right now, and it's gaining a lot of momentum in the banking industry as well. Yes. So the entire financial services industry is transferring a lot of the reporting packages to third-party vendors, yes, to third-party platforms like Deloitte.
Okay, and then more on the technical side, the operational side, what would be the operating model then? So I understand there are some excellent centers, and you also mentioned that the team is spread out across 22 countries. How would that look in practice? Can fintech companies in the Baltics or in other countries of the region take benefit of what you are offering?
Sometimes I have a hard time describing our structure to traditional banks, but I think it's a lot easier for fintechs to understand us. We have a virtual core team, yes, which means that our team physically sits around 25 countries, yes, but we are one team working connected either physically or digitally with each other, yes, but it's in a seamless operational structure, yes. And we have a technology hub that enables our activities, yes. So it's the same technology across all the countries, and a virtual team addressing either from a core perspective, either from a technical perspective or a language perspective, or a local legal or compliance perspective, depending on the jurisdiction that the client is headquartered, or depending on the jurisdiction that the client is active.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and for the explanations. I think that was useful.